there are a lot of deaf autistic people out there, but I think it's difficult to exist openly in a world that doesn't always accept you. When I was growing up, people would always tell me, "Isabella, quiet your hands. You need to keep your hands quiet." What they really meant was for me to be still. There's a behavior some autistic people do called stimming, meaning that we move our body when we need to release energy. Now, that's not a bad thing. It's just something that we need to do. For example, when I stim, I'll move. Yet, sometimes people find it strange or awkward. With the deaf community, I do feel a little more accepted because American Sign Language is not a quiet hand type of language. You need to have loud hands. Hearing people think that deaf people wish they could hear, that they wish their situation was different. Hearing people think sameness is equality, but that is not true. It's the same thing with being autistic. For autistic people, it's our identity, not a pathology. I personally am overwhelmed by sounds. Some deaf people feel like hearing aids are simply uncomfortable. But for me, wearing hearing aids gives me anxiety, stress, and sometimes physical pain in my ears. When I'm in the deaf community with other deaf people or other signers, I can take off my hearing aids and just relax. When we're signing, I don't have to worry about sensory overload. Deaf people don't all hear or not hear at the same levels. They are on a spectrum. People aren't just totally deaf or hearing. Deaf people have varying communication styles and identities, like deaf or hard of hearing. Each deaf person is unique, so there are wide ranges of people, just as it is with the autistic community. For me, the deaf community feels like a safe space for people with autism. We can communicate and socialize without the sensory overload. I do have to say, some drawbacks exist. For example, deaf people need constant eye contact when signing in order to perceive and understand facial expressions. Maintaining eye contact is difficult for a person with autism because it feels uncomfortable and unnatural to lock eyes. For hearing autistic people, it's not a huge issue, but for a deaf person with autism, it can lead to miscommunications or make communication more difficult. I think people want a one-size-fits-all solution. But that's not how the world works. Most hearing people want deaf people to use speech, to wear hearing aids. They don't want people to come across as different. I see that with autism. Neurotypical people and their perspective of autism is completely different from those of us who are autistic. They think people who are autistic should act normal. I think part of being autistic and being deaf is that there's a recognition that you can still do great things without having to change yourself. Overall, I think the world itself is growing, evolving, changing, and becoming a better world. And I think that our responsibility is to make sure that people feel loved and feel accepted.